Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Naturalist Capitalist. I'm Reed Coverdale, and I've got Zach of all trades back on the show again. It's been a while, Zach. How you been?
Good. How about yourself?
Good. Why don't you tell us where you moved and what you're doing now? I don't think any of this was going on last time you were on the show.
Right. Yeah, no, I did. I moved to kind of the western part of Colorado, which is, a little bit more of the right wing part. It's also, it's basically the farming area. It's super open. It's the western slope of Colorado. It starts to be a little bit more of a deserty climate. So that's, you see less bigger cities out here. It's more like the mountain valley communities, and it's nice being away from the cities. Not gonna lie.
Yeah. So you've got like how many acres are you living on right now, and what's the plan for what your property? What are you planning to do with it?
Well, that's the coolest thing about this property is actually, it's about 6 acres, and the people who had it before us, didn't take great care of it. It's a little bit of a dust bowl. It was once upon a time an orchard. So right now it's kind of empty, and a lot of the trees are dead. And we're going to clear those out come the spring, but it's kind of a blank canvas, and there's a lot we could really do with it, which is really cool. But the most important part is I wanted to make a move to being more self-sufficient, or in case society just like takes a shit, kind of like it is right now, totally, or the dollar crashes or whatever. I wanted to be able to have enough land that I could grow my own food if I wanted to, in a community where I could trade with people. There's dairy farms here. The western slope of Colorado, again, it's sort of deserty, so there's a lot of people growing a lot of different things in terms of farming. But there's more ranches, I'd say. There's more meats, more cows, more dairy, and that's awesome, honestly. Not buying meat from the kind of corporate meat industry with the steroids and the antibiotics. You don't have to pay tons of money to Whole Foods to go and get good meat. You just kind of got to know a farmer. So it's nice, which is one of the big draws of kind of moving away from the cities, which has so much catered to them. Like at the beginning of the coronavirus, you really saw it in places like New York, where the the lines in and out of places, or the grabs on things like toilet paper, is because you have millions and millions of people who are all trying to do things all at once, and there never was the resources for everyone to do things all at once like that. It's supposed to be more spaced out. Like the trucks couldn't just all come in at once. They're huge, and that was a problem, you know. And out here, even during the kind of second lockdowns, which had a little bit of a frenzy, people bought up stuff in stores. It doesn't really happen out here. Most of the time, people are kind of taking care of their own needs, and then when something like that happens, there's kind of it's more spread out.
Yeah.
It's way more of a chilled environment to be during this whole madness.
Yeah, I mean, everything about that sounds logical. The preppers or the people who grow their own food don't sound quite as crazy right now as they did a year ago. A lot of people
Right.
are realizing that. Um, so I've had you on the show, and we've talked about like bottom unity and how the left-right paradigm is kind of bullshit. And you and I engage a lot on Twitter. You were a Bernie Sanders guy in 2016, and you used to kind of believe in left unity. I came from the Tea Party Republican side. I believe more in right unity. When it wasn't really until like last year that I realized it makes more sense for me to just have different ideas than other people, but get along with them, than try to have everybody think the same way I do. And then it clicked that that's basically the idea of bottom unity instead of right or left unity. How did that revelation come about for you?
Well, it's kind of two really big things happened. One, the first thing that was in 2015, really during the primaries, after what the Democratic establishment really did to Bernie in terms of cheating him out of things, you really saw kind of the authoritarian power when there's so much power centralized in the organization that the Democrats made, that they can kind of override the will of the people, almost on a whim. And it happens a lot. And really what happened in 2015 was that's when I started paying way closer attention. When I found out that Bush lied about the weapons of mass destruction, I started paying attention more to politics in general. But after Bernie, I started paying attention more to like establishment and kind of actual like the structure of politics, not necessarily just the policies.
Right.
And it, it was corrupt and super. It's kind of terrible and broken. Essentially, it's a broken system. And I really like Tulsi, and I supported Tulsi because of her ideals and kind of what she stood for. But the big thing that really pushed me towards bottom unity, especially away from left unity, was while I was working with Tulsi and kind of now in this place that I'm living. So I was, Tulsi's campaign had a lot of right-wing people who really, uh, resonated with her message, or at the very least appreciated someone who was willing to work with their side. And just, I worked for a campaign, I volunteered, and just doing things like that, knocking on doors to people, who were Trump supporters, and figuring out how I could approach them, or even just have a conversation with them without, completely, being antagonistic towards them or what they believe. And that, working with them in that campaign taught me a lot. But when I moved out here to the farmland, I kind of noticed something, had a little bit of epiphany, and well, I'll just say it this way: the people in this town, and we have water rights. When you move into a farming town, generally that's a big thing people talk about, is the water rights and how you get their water and where it comes from. And so everyone in this town has water rights, and it's tied to your land. And it's, we all get basically a certain amount of shares in the water company based on how big your land is. And I realized that this town is totally right wing, all Trump supporters. It's that kind of farming town. And what I noticed was with this policy, like everyone always gets kind of confused, or the terms left and right sort of obfuscate things, because when we're talking about left and right, we're talking about the middle axis, basically. Just we're talking about economics. We're not really talking about any social issues. That's the libertarian versus authoritarian axis. So everyone here, these water shares, they're tied to your land, which is technically a left-wing economic policy. But the reason why it's tied to your land is because it's a libertarian policy. We don't want a government agency that controls the water and then makes decisions for the water company. We just said we want to be the ones in power. So the water company is owned by everyone. But if you try to really explain it to them that they're all orchards, and if you phrase it that the water is the means of production, and we wanted the people to have the means of production in this town, which is technically left wing,
Right.
they would not like that, just because of the idea of like socialism and kind of how it's super demonized.
Yeah.
But actually, though, it has nothing to do with left or right wing. It's just, it has nothing to do with the authoritarian side of the axis. This is just totally libertarian. What makes it left wing is the idea that the shares in the water company is tied to the land. If it were more of a right wing economics, which is capitalism, you would be given the shares in the water company, and that would be your capital for investing in the land. And then you would have those shares, and you could sell them, trade them, do whatever you wanted with them, because that would be your personal capital. But in the left wing economics and socialism, you're saying it's more important that the community that uses the water to produce fruit, they're the ones who have the say in this. So by tying the amount of shares you get in this water company to the land that's in this town and uses this water, that's really the only difference in a left or right wing policy. Do we give you the capital, or is it tied to the community? And so these words, communism, socialism, they get super, super demonized. But if you really break it down, the thing we need to talk about, that's a much more important thing, is the authoritarian versus libertarian. And this is what really made me believe in bottom unity, because a libertarian who's right wing, might want those shares as capital that they could do what they want with. But we're more able in this town, which is a very, very right wing town, to use these policies, even though they're left wing, versus everyone in this town, including myself, which I'm a left wing, libertarian. And if anyone tried to say, actually, what we need is the government to control the water, and then we vote on policies and changes like taxes or price hikes and stuff like that, that would make everyone in this town upset. And then whoever got voted into those government positions would always have way more control over these things than the people did at the end of the day. And keeping it where the shares are tied to the people is the libertarian part of this policy. The government can't ever step in and say, we're going to change the way the water works. it would have to come through a shareholders meeting where the town is the shareholders. And if you decided as a person who lives in this town that you didn't care, you didn't want your voice heard, you just wouldn't go to that meeting and vote. But if you have shares in the water company, you own it, which means you're invited to the shareholder meeting to vote on these things. And it really keeps the power with the people. So that, is an inherently libertarian policy. And I found that, it's actually more of a harmonious living when you talk about bottom unity. Like, look at the way Biden runs his campaign and how many authoritarian right wingers are just totally on board with it, like the Lincoln Project, and all the people who started that.
Yeah.
That like the top unity, they're getting along just fine. They don't care about the parts of it that are left wing or the parts of it that are right wing because they're the ones in power. That's, the power is always centralized, always given to the government, no matter whether the economics lean right or left. They control all of it and everything that happens to it, and they can use, set up any barriers to entry that they want. Look at Amash's Twitter, and he's talk about how Congress is like a pay to. Oh, did it cut out?
Just start over where you said Amash. It cut out for a second. You're still going on.
Right. Amash's Twitter, where he keeps talking about how Congress is pay to play, where you have to basically buy your entry into these committees, and the committees decide on changes to bills. So if you don't buy your way onto these committees, you just have no say. So those are the barriers that the authoritarians set up for anyone who would go in and represent what people actually want. And unless they're buying their way in and they have the friends, they just don't get in. I mean, look at even AOC. It just happened where she got totally screwed out of being, on the Energy Commission.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people talked about that she was like a shoo-in for. And it's because, she's very popular and has a lot of weight behind her and she can fundraise very well. But, a lot of Democrats in the establishment just don't like her, say that she has a very anti-establishment message. So they just cut her out. So all the people who think that AOC is going there to fight for a Green New Deal, well, maybe that was true, but now AOC doesn't have a say at all in developing these energy policies that committee is in charge of. So it just doesn't matter, honestly, who you go and vote in or what the system is right now. The authoritarians just have way too much control. And so, I found that the idea of bottom unity, where we can say, all right, we choose our towns. This town runs their water like this. And if you didn't want to run it like that, I'm sure there are other towns close by that don't. There's just every little pocket. And these towns aren't very big. They're a couple, I'd say maybe like 6 miles long towns each. There's a couple of thousand people living in them. It's very spread out because they're all farming communities. But, each small community is kind of making their own rules. And it, since they're the ones in power, since the people's voices are very much heard in these small towns, because, I mean, from every level, even the cops, the cops are just small town cops. There aren't many of them. They know almost all of the people and they're really chill. There isn't the same, like Antifa wouldn't have a problem with the cops here because they're not doing anything crazy like they do in the cities,
Right.
and they don't get empowered to do it because a big government who likes the authority can empower the police to do or not do whatever they want. But in a smaller town, the police are just, using that power against the people who live there. And they know if that they ever abused that power that they would answer for it from the town that they live in. And it's actually a point that's made by Black Lives Matter a lot, is that the community I think that's what they call it, community policing. It's where the police in your town are the ones policing that town. And when the town's just not very big, you just kind of get that naturally as a thing that happens. Anything that's voted on in this town is talked about in the town halls, and anyone who cares about that issue goes because there's not many people in the town. And any one issue that needs to change, there's only probably a handful of people that it affects, and you go and you talk about it, and then you come to a solution. And things here are pretty harmonious. And for the most part, there's sometimes there's some people or some events, but it's really kind of, doesn't matter if you're left wing, doesn't matter if you're right wing. There's actually a lot of both in this town. But, people's voices are heard and the people are empowered to make the changes in their community that they want to. So it works really well. And we don't need the big government, big city structure to come in and lock everyone down for Corona or, You know, it just things work easier. And I'm pretty sure at least I'm sorry, like a big portion of that comes from the fact that they're libertarian centered policies where power is given to the people and not just the fact that this is a smaller town. Because obviously there are some things that are easier to do in a smaller town and some things that just work better because you don't have 7 million people in a tiny little island like Manhattan, you know?
Right. Yeah,
But
so I think you make an interesting point there about the water rights too, because a lot of people think that right and left economics can't work together. But that's actually a perfect example where they do, because you have property rights, you own your property, you're allowed to do what you want on your property. But then you also have the left wing economics of the water, and those dovetail perfectly together. Where if you were authoritarian about either one, there would be a clash.
there's also a side to this that I never really knew to think about because I always lived in not big cities, but bigger cities than this. And it's that, okay, for example, me and my neighbor share a water tap, right?
Mm.
And it's just that it's the line that comes from the water source to our land. And all that means essentially is that we switch off every day. So let's say we're both have orchards on our land and we both want to water them. I get the water one day, he gets the water the next day, and we both have cisterns to hold water if we want to, you know, water every single day, kind of thing. And we could go to the town, we could go to a shareholders meeting essentially and say we want another water tap. A line comes in so that we don't have to split it like this, but it doesn't actually affect how much water I get that I have to split it every day with him, and it's a cost. Someone has to go build that line, and the water company would pay for that, but the water company is owned by all of us. So even in my own head, I have to say, well, is it worth it for me to even pitch the town on this for a little, like a minor convenience? It doesn't interrupt my farming, doesn't interrupt his farming. He can't affect the amount of water that I get. He can't really hurt the tap and make it so I can't get water, you know? So is it worth it? Do I go to the town and pitch them like, I want my own water tap so I don't have to do this because it's more convenient to me? And then they all are going to vote and say, no, we don't want to spend money on this because you'll get over it. Or even if my cistern broke, right? And maybe I didn't have the money to replace it. And I went and said, I can't water my crops every day because of this, you know? Like the town, when it's just the people, when the people own these things and you can talk about it, I'd be willing to bet in a town of farming people that someone would be able to lend me a cistern to make this easier so that the water company didn't pay for this, the digging and placing the line and making sure it all works. Because at the end of the day, it's not the city collecting taxes that forces all this. And I don't feel the same kind of entitlement. It's just a company that I own part of, and then I would be forcing it to do work and spend money for myself for a minor convenience, you know? And I think people in bigger cities really miss that, and they don't see the like kind of personal responsibility side of their utilities, the power, the water, the everything, like the trash cleanup, all the stuff that goes into making a city function, that's split up and different people work these different jobs, and if something breaks down, someone's like, well, why is the water to my building cut off? This is stupid. The water to their building's not cut off, and it becomes a big thing. But if the water line to my neighbor's farm breaks down or breaks, there's it's just it I can go to my other neighbor and be like, can you help us with this? Like, give us some water, because they know that it's just everything works more harmoniously, and what goes into what goes making your farm. Like when what the means are to producing the fruits of your labor, you become more conscious of where they come from, and how you use them, and how to be more kind of essentially green about using it, you know, and using your resources, and not driving your community into debt for minor conveniences, which I feel like it's kind of lost on people in giant cities. So it was just an interesting thing that I kind of learned about coming out here that I didn't expect to. But it's again, it's not a left or right thing, because being kind of community minded is, if it's right wing, it's sort of volunteerism, but that is also how it works in like libertarian socialism. I could go to the town, which again, it's my water company, and say I need a fix to this problem because I don't have a cistern, and the community is the one who votes, say, okay, Zach keeps having this problem, and maybe it is really impacting his farm. So maybe it is like a good decision to get him his own line, or maybe the community again will help me and lend me a thing. But it's all, that's kind of sort of the essence of socialism and communism. It's being community minded about, knowing who you're working for, and like working like the whole for the people, and the people own this, and power to the people. All that is based on what happens naturally if the government isn't in the way, and
Correct.
again, it just led me straight towards bottom unity, because I can get along with all the right wingers in my town and live happily with them. I don't have to care that they, in their own minds, think it's more important to, be an individual or care a little bit less about the community, because at the end of the day, they need the community in certain areas. We all
Right.
work together towards the same goals, and it just things kind of work better that way, left or right, talking about how we want to, in our own community, build the town. It's all just people powered, not giant centralized government powered. And if you've got giant centralized left-wing government or giant centralized right-wing government, it sort of always ends up being bad for the people. But when it's the powers to the people, left or right wing, it sort of ends up being good for those people. So
Yeah.
I'm all bottom unity now. I don't like left authoritarians. I think it's going to lead to disaster.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people need to listen to this because it's totally true. And the left right bullshit is what's keeping us from working together because I saw Comrade Misty is Putin's buddy, that the woman who's always defending Assange. She tweeted out today, "Wow, look, Sarah Palin is to the left of AOC," and I'm just like, that's such a dumb thing to say. Just because Sarah Palin says that she thinks Julian Assange should be freed and AOC hasn't been explicit, that doesn't make her to the left of AOC.
Exactly. That would be that's a social issue, and
right.
like just on the basis that it does not deal with economics, that is not a left or right wing issue. And you're talking about a libertarian or authoritarian issue. Should Assange be locked up for exposing secrets? Well, these secrets exposed government abuses, and I, as a libertarian-minded person, say no, of course not. He should be free to say what he wants in his own publications, even if what he's saying exposed secrets you didn't want to be exposed.
Right.
Or on the other side is the authoritarians that say no, he broke the what I think is the law from another country, even though they don't have those laws, and we are allowed to go and lock him up. And that, it's not a right or left wing issue. It's not socialism. It's not capitalism. That's just, do you believe in the freedom of speech? So if you believe in the freedom of speech, you're heading more towards freedom. It's a libertarian issue. If you want Assange to be locked up, you're heading more towards authoritarian. So that has nothing. Yeah, that's not a good point. That's not left or right. That's, I'm saying that's not a good point. I think it's Sarcasm Stardust is her at.
Yeah, that's
and
it.
and I do, I think she does make a lot of really great points in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. I'm not saying like she's dumb or anything. I think that's a bad take though, because it's not, AOC is not left or right for not speaking out. She's a coward for not speaking out.
Right.
And she's placating authoritarianism for not speaking out. But it's not that, Sarah Palin is left because she supports Assange. It's just she's less authoritarian than AOC is, apparently. She's more liberty minded,
Yeah.
which is, I mean, a little bit. Though, honestly, it kind of makes sense if you think of AOC as like she wants socialist policies through a government structure. And if you think of Sarah Palin as the government from Alaska who is like in favor of UBI because, Alaska makes a lot of money from the oil. It's like the oil companies paying for the rights to the people of Alaska, which is honestly a little bit of a left-wing economic policy, but it's
Right.
still capital that you're saying, the community of Alaska, that the profits from the oil company, part of it belongs to the people of Alaska. So then they get paid a UBI because oil gets to drill there, which again, left-wing libertarian.
Right.
And it has nothing, again, you can criticize socialism and capitalism all day, and I will join you, especially from an authoritarian structure. But capitalism works when it's liberty minded, and
Right.
and socialism works when it's liberty minded. And honestly, a policy like Alaska's UBI, which again comes from profits and you're basically giving capital to people, it's kind of a mixed economy policy, and it's more libertarian than anything else because again, power to the people, not to government structures. Government would ask the people to vote on a tax that would go to the government on, oil drilling. So the people wouldn't really see any of that money. It would just go towards the government, and maybe they would build a new school or some roads or something. But it's more capitalist to say, actually, the profits should just go to the people as capital, and then they can spend it how they want. But, it's not, it's kind of both, it doesn't really matter left or right because they can mix just fine. It's really authority or liberty. Do you want the power to be a people or power to these like structures that you say are the, they spend money on police because they're imposing the laws that you're voting on. And it's, there's an argument for it. And there's a reason that it's the other axis from libertarian. There's a lot of societies that have authoritarian policies that have worked well for that society. I'm not going to, discount those. Like obviously, if, like Russia's space program at the beginning, because they were so, they were communist, they could just go to the country and get all the resources they need to do something really quickly. And if your goal is to do things really quickly like that, then you probably want an authoritarian structure. I think it's always going to, like authoritarian structures, maybe a net good for the society to move quicker, but I think it's always worse for the people that make up that society. So that kind of puts, shifts me away towards all the things that give power to these big structures. I want to give power to the people because I think we live more harmoniously both with each other and with the earth when we do that.
Yeah, no, totally. I remember when I first started realizing that this left-right paradigm was complete bullshit was when I was also working on Tulsi's campaign. And Tulsi is much more libertarian than Bernie Sanders. And I'd say she's a little bit to the right of him too. But a lot of her supporters were insisting that she was way to the left of Bernie. And I was trying to understand why. And they'd say, well, she wants to legalize prostitution. She wants to legalize all drugs, not just marijuana. She wants to pull out of all the wars. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like all of my Ron Paul supporter friends will love all those things. And you're scaring the shit out of them by telling them that Tulsi is like an extreme left winger. That was when it really, really hit with me. And people just need to start, like you said, thinking it in an up-down version, in the authority, liberty version. Because, if you look at nature, if you look at anything, it just works better when you let it naturally work itself out. You let people trade with each other. You let people talk with each other. You build up these walls and all these mandates and all these rules, and that's where there's collision.
Yep, absolutely. And honestly, a lot of these structures, they're not meant to evolve or change, and it's really a problem. Like you enact a law because you think, okay, this law is smart for what's happening right now, but you don't really make laws thinking, well, what if new technology changes the way we perceive this problem in 10 years? You don't really think about how problems you can't see or can't think of yet are going to impact your laws. And we still have laws that haven't gone away from the 1700s. And that's insane to me. Like that's absolutely insane. Like that we don't have some kind of way to just sunset laws that we don't want or try to update laws. They just stay there forever. And especially some that give power to the government that they abuse for years and years and years, like the Patriot Act. Even if, and I don't think it did, but even if it made sense to give the government all the power we did at the, after 9/11 and beginning of those wars, then, eventually it would end. And eventually, in theory, the war would end and we wouldn't need that to happen anymore. But the laws don't end. They just wrote it in a way that we would have to repeal those laws. And that's an insane process. And so, again, I feel like power to the people is always better than power to these giant structures. And I think it's actually a little unfortunate that the left has co-opted the power to the people message a little bit, because power to the people is not left wing, it's libertarian, And I think we really, one of the big things that needs to happen, maybe in the Libertarian Party, or maybe just in discussions, or I don't know how to fix this problem, but the idea that we call socialist policies left or capitalist policies right, there's just no reason for that. And I think it obfuscates so much, and it makes it so easy for people to attach social issues to, to economic ideas. Socialism and capitalism, like them or hate them, they're just economic theories.
Right.
They're ways to use math that someone made up. It's not like, it has nothing to do with any social thing at all.
Right.
If you want to say, I want to give healthcare to the people, right, or to everyone, there's like a way you would go about that in a capitalist economy, and a way you'd go about that in a socialist economy. And the idea of healthcare for everyone is not inherently left or right. It's just an idea, and then how you use the economics would make it left or right. But
Right.
if it's not about math, it's not left or right, essentially. If someone's talking about something and it's not numbers, it's probably not left or right wing. It's just a social issue that you're talking about, authoritarian or libertarian. And I get it. You could say, like, the people who largely identify as the left-wing economic people generally agree with these ideas more, like trans women in sports or something like that. But again, trans women are not math, so that is not a left-wing economic thing. Like, it's just not. We use those words wrong, left and right wing, and I think that's a lot of the reason why there's so much division.
Yes.
Because I'm left, you're right. It's like, well, neither of you are talking about math, so careful. It's not economics.
Yeah, and it's most people on the left that feel that way about trans women in sports. Obviously, not a certain person on the left, but
right. This is just the first example that came to mind. I was like, well, what's something that this group, like, I could what's a problem that generally only this group kind of supports? And again, that if you said it that way, that's a more accurate way to say it. But when we say it's a left-wing policy for to want trans women in sports, that's not how that works. That's not technically socialism.
Right.
And people running around calling, oh, that's socialist, or it's capitalist to want religion in the government. It's like, no, that's not how any of that works. And the left,
I like the math. If it doesn't have to do with math, it's not left or right. Like, that's a good. I'll probably post that on Twitter unless you want to. I don't want to steal that from you.
No, go for it. You could have it.
That's good. I love that. So there's something kind of funny going on, and this isn't the first time. You've obviously kind of left the Democrats, and you're more into the Libertarians now. But in 2016, there was this big push for Dem exit. We're done with the Democrats. Screw the Democrats. And then, of course, they all came flooding back. And then this year, they were like, oh, no, this time we mean it. Like, we're done with the Democrats. And now they're already circling back around because Nina Turner's running for Congress. And they're like, oh, well, she's a good Democrat, so I'm going to support this. So I just think that this Dem exit thing, I didn't buy it when they first were saying. I was kind of interested to see what they did, but nobody got organized. They talked about a movement for a People's Party or whatever. They didn't do jack shit with that. They didn't do anything with the Green Party. The Green Party was rigged by such a small number of people that it didn't go anywhere. It wasn't invaded by all these people who were pissed off. I think like 80% of those people are going to vote Democrat again. Do you think so? And is it kind of like mind-boggling to watch?
A little bit. I mean, for me in 2016, that was really when I paid attention to the insider politics, but I didn't really get all of the information together. And I did the same thing. Well, to be fair, I didn't declare Dem exit. I just declared, the DNC. I was like, is corrupt. Like, what's going on here? And I really wanted to look more into it. So I supported Tulsi, who was a Democrat. And I was like, I was willing to be like, all right, well, she's one of the good ones, But then I started really working for a campaign, and I kind of realized that it doesn't matter that she was one of the good ones. It doesn't matter that she had a ton of great opinions. The problem itself was the DNC and how, like, there were times Tulsi wouldn't get to speak at a conference or something because she didn't pay the DNC enough money, or it'd be like only, like, I think specifically this situation I'm remembering was like she didn't buy the voter rolls for Iowa, which were like $180,000 just to see who registered as a Democrat. So she didn't get to speak at this event for some reason, even though it was held by Iowa Democrats, not necessarily the DNC. And
Right.
and then really, I think, Amash, when he was talking about how basically just how nothing happens in Congress that doesn't go through the leadership, you know, it's it is now kind of, especially since so much of this is exposed, that it's insane to me, and I'll say this in like 2017, after that whole rig primary, I forget the name of the person, something Black, maybe Jared Black. He was a lawyer who sued the DNC.
Oh, Jared Beck. Jared Beck.
Jared Beck. Yeah, he sued the DNC, and the DNC basically said, yeah, no, we're allowed to rig things, right? So the only reason I was really on board with supporting Tulsi or even Bernie again was the idea that we're just going to override that. Enough people know but the energy's here. We're going to override the rigging process because we saw it last time. And then I saw just how deep the DNC's corruption is. And that was really the revelation this time was, oh no, it doesn't matter how big your movement is. Like the problem is that nothing counts because of the game that they've set up and rigged for themselves. And the only true way for the people to ever get the policies we would want is to first get all that power back. And there's no one trying to do that who isn't a libertarian, to be honest. And what really kind of upsets me about Nina Turner is that she spoke at like my Movement for a People's Party like had some kind of like online events when they were really coming together, and Nina was one of the big speakers supporting it, right? And I'll go back to Amash. He said, I'm switching parties, and became a libertarian, right? And the second that he did, he got turned to an independent, and if you go to like the congressional voting records right now, you would see the amount of Democrats in a section, the amount of Republicans, and then independents. But it's, Amash is an independent. He's not a declared independent. He's libertarian. But they're actually in DC saying that we won't show that you're a libertarian until there's enough libertarians. They don't set a number or a percent. They just say there needs to be more than one, and that they're going to play this game for a long time. And so it doesn't, like the whole idea of how do we have a legitimate third party? How do we legitimize a third party? It's a catch-22 because it has to be legitimate, and then it is legitimate. That's how it self-legitimizes, essentially. So if Nina Turner was serious about her efforts to, have a movement for a People's Party, she would have to run as a People's Party candidate and then get into Congress and then be declared independent by the political establishment until there was enough People's Party candidates who were elected. So when people, it's not a legitimate party, she'd never win. It's like, well, it has to just, why don't you pressure AOC and the squad? You got 5 of them now, with Cori Bush going in there. Why don't all of them change their registration to People's Party? Yes, they would be kicked out of the same committees they're already being kept out of, and they would lose some DNC funding, but they're wildly popular. They could out fundraise any loan they would get from the DNC anyway. But that's how you have a party. They would have to just declare themselves People's Party, and then Nina Turner would have to run as People's Party and keep legitimizing it, and like Rand Paul or anyone else in Congress who called themselves a libertarian would just have to be libertarians and switch to the party. And then we can keep sending libertarian congressmen, and I don't know when it shifts and they start being called libertarians on paper, because it's not defined in any way. It's totally just a propaganda trick. But it really makes me angry about Nina. If she thinks it is like an important thing to move away from the Democrats and the way they can rig things, then you're just signing up as a person to get all of the money to be rigged against, or because you're playing their game to get their money. It's crazy to me that she would take that route, especially after supporting my Movement for a People's Party. But the whole system itself is rigged, and it's another reason, again, for I think bottom unity is important, because a place like Colorado I think is perfect to get like a good left-wing candidate in, even for like a Senate, no, not Senate, a House position. We got 9 of them, and we got districts that are part of like the, the super, like the Boulder, kind of Denver districts that are super, super progressive probably wouldn't vote libertarian, but they also know that it's only because they think of the libertarians as a right-wing group. That's like
Right.
some kind of offshoot of the Republicans. But if
Yeah.
you could really have like a good left-wing candidate or left-wing libertarian candidate, that's how you legitimize these things, and that's how you get this done. So yeah,
Yeah.
Nina's very disappointing to me that she'd just go so quickly to the Democrats again,
Yeah.
and because it delegitimizes the movement she was propelling.
Yeah.
She's taken the wind out of its sails essentially by not running as that. You're saying, oh, I don't think a third party can win, and even if I do, like, I don't know, I don't really get the rationale behind it anymore. But there's a lot of people who just don't care. They posture, they fuck around and find out people, or the Dem exit people. It's just, it's posturing. They don't really mean it because, and there's a side that I kind of get. It's because they want to be hopeful and not completely defeatist. And at the end of the day, you'd have to say, nope, Nina's running as a Dem, so I'm just can't support it, and there's no reason to, and everything is terrible, so why try? And a lot of them are just like, no, we have to hope and keep fighting for change. But it's like I said on Twitter, is how many thousands of hours from people, how many people are going to volunteer their time to go into Nina's campaign? How many people are going to donate their money? How many millions of dollars is it going to take to get her to Congress, where she is a Democrat, and if she wants committee appointments, she's going to have to play Pelosi's game the same exact way that AOC is. It's crazy to me. And like, it should have been like they were on the supporting Bernie side of things. Like even AOC and Nina should have had a conversation saying, like, okay, the squad is going to turn to People's Party now, and you're going to run as People's Party, and we're going to advocate for anyone else who wants to run as a People's Party. And I think, honestly, the Libertarians should do something similar. I think Rand Paul, so he needs to get away from like promoting Trumpism.
Yes.
Like, I think he's trying to like just kiss his ass so hard for maybe to get an endorsement, or maybe to, I don't know what game he thinks he's playing, but he's playing it poorly, and he needs to pick up the libertarian mantle again. And I think it's a perfect time while Amash is still there for, just get him to flip, get anyone who is liberty minded to call themselves libertarian, join the party, and legitimize the party, because it doesn't happen from the outside. It doesn't happen when enough people in the country say, I support the libertarians. It happens because, again, I don't think this should be the case. We're playing the establishment's game, and they're all authoritarians. So we just have to have a movement of our own where all of the people who are in the government, almost at any level, really become public about the libertarian side of things. And I think it's important for a lot of the people who are in the government or who are planning on running in the future to drop the narrative of the division that you're going for Republican voters. Because I think it's like, look at Spike Cohen. If he wanted to run, he'd be able to really reach out to left-wing people and pull them to be liberty-minded, because he understands what both sides care about and what is left and right and what is up and down. And you can totally appeal to left-wing people with libertarian values. And as you just don't promote the capitalism, because that's, again, if it's not math, it's not economics, it's not left or right wing. Yeah. So the social issues of, promote freedom, at the end of the day, like a lot of left people really agree with the ideas of libertarianism. The freedom of expression, like, the LGBTQ, and how they've always kind of just been fighting to be free to be themselves, to act the way other people do in public with their romantic partners. It's actually a super liberty-minded position, not a left-wing position. It's just, should people be free to do a thing? If you say yes, that's a liberty thing. So, I think as libertarian candidates, one of the things that people kind of fail on is reaching out to them, reaching out to the left wing, or by only trying to get Republican-minded voters. Because at the end of the day, a lot of Republican voters are the same as a lot of Democratic voters, which is, totally brainwashed into the duopoly, who won't vote for something they don't see as like a legitimate party, know. And a lot of them are like, well, I'm a libertarian, but also we need to use the federal government to outlaw these things I don't like, know. And we have to be clear that that's not libertarian. And if you're fighting for free speech, which a lot of right-wingers are doing now, and that's great, I love to see it, but a lot of them are actually not fighting for it on libertarian grounds. They're just saying, I should be allowed to say what I want, and also Antifa shouldn't be allowed to say what they want. And
Yeah,
it's like, you either fight for freedom of speech for people you hate, or you're not fighting for freedom of speech, because everyone is fine with the people they like saying what they like to hear. Everyone. That's not like, you're not doing anything by like saying you're okay with that.
yeah. I've been, as you know, I've been pushing for Tulsi to become a libertarian hardcore, and I've gotten Justin Amash's attention and Spike Cohen's attention, and there's like a ton of pushback against that from like traditional like right-wing libertarians. And I point out to them that she's pretty much just as libertarian as Mike Lee is. Like that 80-20 rule, like that they feel like a few issues are so much bigger than they are. I hear so many libertarians say Tulsi's only good on like one issue. I'm like, first of all, I don't think they know anything about her platform. But even if you really thought she was only good on foreign policy, that's such a huge issue. That's like at least a third of the issues. That's like saying, I mean, that's like saying she's only bad on one policy. Then, if you think all of her domestic policies crap, then oh yeah, she's only bad on one policy. I mean, it's just stupid. Right. And I mean, I really, really want her to join, and I do think she'd have to change a couple things about her platform. But if she did, if you had Justin Amash and Tulsi Gabbard, two Congress people who were pushed out of their parties, who agree that they believe in liberty, like that's huge. I mean, even if they don't
Absolutely.
run for president together, which I'd love them to, even if they just both join the Libertarian Party, like that opens the doors so much, because like you've said, we've kind of painted it as this offshoot of the Republican Party where it's not. And I mean, I hope a lot more people like you start seeing that and join and try to get involved, because that's what we need to become relevant.
Yep. And it would, and yeah, there's sort of that aspect of it becoming, relevant in the mind of the people, and it would be great. And I think more libertarians really just need to, I think it'll happen when things calm down from this election a little bit, but take a more critical look at Tulsi's policies, because a lot of them are very much, it's like working with this system. She kind of looks at things like, okay, well, we have these systems, how do we work so that the power is given to the people?
Right.
But she is a very liberty and individualistic minded person. Like
yes.
At her core, really, that's all she wants. And she's like, the bad policies for libertarians, a lot of it's branding, a lot of it's how it's talked about on social media. Some of it, don't get me wrong, I don't agree with, you know, like her gun one, she's actually very libertarian in the fact that she wouldn't want to take weapons away from people, but she's also kind of more in favor of the background checks things because she realizes there's a problem and wants to try and fix it. But I don't think the problem is that she's an authoritarian or anything. I think the problem is she hasn't heard all of the other solutions,
Yes.
And one thing I'll always say I've really appreciated about Tulsi is that on all kinds of issues in the last year or two, since I've kind of been paying attention and volunteering, is she's always open to listening to why she's wrong about something. And you may just disagree. At the end of the day, you two disagree, but she's always open to listening why you think she's wrong. And she's changed a lot of her opinions over the years.
Yes.
Because of this, because she's willing to listen and talk to people, she's changed a lot. And that is like, that's pretty perfect, because at the end of the day, if we're going to live in the society we have, either you're a libertarian who's the kind that thinks the entire federal government should be abolished and you won't accept anything less than that, and that's intense, but those people exist, or you think we should work with it. And Tulsi is a good person to have, because at the end of the day, she cares about liberty, she cares about people and individuality, and she's always willing to hear what people want. And it's kind of like the water rights, if we're not going to be fully people powered, if we're going to choose representatives in this, representative democracy, it might as well be representatives who think, people are more important than, kind of the overarching thing. Like the individuals that make a society are the important part of a society, and one who's willing to listen, because at the end of the day, that's what representing someone is listening to the people and then changing your ideas and working with that. And she's always been great on that. And she is very liberty minded. And I think she would get along with a lot of libertarians. And I actually think there's going to be a decent amount of work people like me and you have to do just to break the idea that the libertarians are some offshoot of the Republicans, because it's being libertarians, not being right wing. And that's a huge failing that our society has right now, is thinking of social issues as left or right, because they're not. And it inhibits us as libertarians from being able to actually grow to the point where we could overtake the duopoly or really affect the changes we want in the society, because we're just kneecapping ourselves. We're saying anything that's too socially left, we're not going to look at, even though some of those policies would give us more power as people, and that is inherently what libertarianism is. So, there's work to do everywhere, and I think we're going to have a lot of people who are going to say they're leaving, and it's happening, especially on Parler. They're saying they're boycotting the Republican votes, or saying it's a corrupt party, or saying they're leaving the Republican Party, and they're going to try and pick up a mantle of a third party, and they might look at the libertarians as some kind of crazy offshoot, because at the end of the day, a lot of people in this country are sort of authoritarian because they've been brainwashed to think that the government should handle everything, and that's the problem. Government should not handle everything. They're bad at it.
Yeah, totally.
They're really bad at it. But
go ahead.
Well, it's like the water thing out here. The worst thing that can happen is there's a drought, but that affects all of us equally. It's not the government who is just mishandling it. And at the end of the day, when the people come together to solve the problems in their own communities, they get solved in ways that are, that people are okay with. At the end of the day, none of us are I think the water here was shut off like 3 weeks early, and it had nothing to do with anything that people decided. It wasn't that we were, the government mandated this for reasons. It was just that there was less water, so everyone's got shut off, and that's just the way it is. And that's hardship and it sucks, but the community's all in it together. Kind of like the celebrities are saying about the coronavirus, but this time it's true.
Yeah. Well, no, I totally agree. We got to be having more of these conversations. We've got to open this tent up, because otherwise we're going nowhere. Nothing's going to change. So I will put a link in the description to Zach's Twitter page and to mine. You guys can follow us on Twitter and keep checking in on the videos. Zach, thanks for coming on.
Amash Gabbard 2024. That's the real message you want to get out there. And if this reaches Tulsi and Amash in any way, you two should absolutely come together and help make the Libertarian Party more legitimate in the minds of the people. And then I think when we do that, we can make it legitimate in the minds of the government, because they won't have a choice. If we're going to overpower things, it has to be in a way that, if there's enough libertarians in government and they call themselves that, and the people know that this group's the libertarians, then it gets hard to label them all as independents. And that's kind of what we need to do. And I think the only way to really do it is to open up the tent and talk about these things in real ways. Economics be economics, social issues be social issues. We talk about them, but not with the obfuscations that we have.
Totally agree. All right, Zach, thanks for coming on. We will have you back on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Conversation's going. So.
Yeah, appreciate it. See you next time.
All right.